Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Thriving Adoptees podcast. And welcome to the show, VL Brunskill. Lovely to see you on the show.
It's an honor to be here, Simon.
Yeah, it's honor's all mine. Honor's all mine. So, listeners, VL and me were just talking about what we're going to talk about, and we talked about resilience, and I think we'll probably get to that at some point. But when I had another look at your website, this phrase really just jumped out for me, and the phrase was spiritual healing, and I thought maybe that's got a little bit more legs to it than yeah. So why did you put the word spiritual healing on your website when you redid it last time? Can you remember?
Yeah, I was taking a look at my past. A lot of times people will ask me, the other thing we were going to talk about was resilience, is, how after what you've been through in your life, have you become this? I'm a leader, a business leader, and how did you do it? Because sometimes people go through things and they don't bounce back. We were talking about being bouncing balls, right?
Yeah.
It's not in their world to bounce back very easily, and I always have somehow. However, no matter how resilient I have been, there was some damage. And whether you want to look at it or not, and be honest about it or not, I think writing this book, I have a book coming out this summer, and writing that made me realize that there was some damage and that there was some work to be done. I've always been, I'm going to put it in air quotes, a spiritual person. So I've had a faith, and not a formal religion faith, just a faith. And I was starting to take a hard look at my experiences and how to kind of move past them more wholly. I would put it that way. More wholly. Not holy, wholly.
You mean holy with a W, not
Yes, correct.
Yeah.
Well, yep.
Yeah. So, what do you think was damaged?
My sense of, it's funny. On one hand, I'll say I'm such a secure person, and I can make it through anything, and I never take a right or left turn when I'm faced with an issue. I always plow right straight through it. But what was damaged was my sense of, I think, belonging at first. Excuse me. So I was adopted at birth, 7 months old. I had been in 4 foster homes. I did not, of course, don't recall that because I was so young. But one of the things that I think was damaged was that sense of belonging, that sense of security, right? I didn't have the security. That was damaged. And faith in family, that was damaged a bit, based on what my childhood and what I went through. And although I bounced back from it, that doesn't mean that I didn't need to really take a look at it in other ways.
Yeah. So, how would I have known? How would somebody else have known, or how did you know that this sense of belonging was damaged?
Well, they might not have known. I mean, unless you knew me pretty well, you probably would not have known. However, I always feel like an imposter, right? I have that imposter syndrome. I would do book signings, and I'm sitting there going, "What? I can't believe it's me here. I have, do I deserve this?" There's many times in my professional life that I felt like the outsider. Sometimes envying other writers, envying other professionals. Oh, they have more stability, they have more education, they have more. So you might not have recognize it because of course I'm not letting on that I have this
No,
crazy syndrome,
no,
but it's there. It's there. And also with friends, I'm not as I don't have a lot of inner circle friends, that's another perfect symptom of it, knowing that I don't have that sense of belonging
yeah,
because I feel different than the other people around me, I always have.
yeah. So you said there was work to be done.
Yeah, and the work to be done was a part of it is sharing of the stories, right? So part of my spiritual healing is digging into the stories to my life, to what happened to me, and then as they say, hindsight's 2020, right? So you look back at things when you're first going through them and surviving them, and I had written some things about what I went through, but it was a different kind of story. I was writing different kinds of stories that were looking inside a little bit more.
Yeah. And what did you find when you looked inside?
As I said, I found more damage than I thought had been there initially.
You'd underestimated the damage.
I did. I underestimated it. I because I'm a literary person, right? So I put everything into very succinct terms when I do think that way. But I needed to embrace my past. I was adopted into abuse, and I needed to embrace my past. And in order to move past it as a healthy adult, right, it's very, very important to kind of look at it also from a larger perspective in the world of what other people are going through.
Yeah. So what did the work look like then? What did you do? What was the work that you did to?
Um, it took up some of them are a little, metaphysical kind of thing. So
You
I
go
did
for it. There's
med
there's nothing too woo woo on this show.
meditation.
Yeah.
I started to meditate, which I had never really done. And at first I was, the person sitting, um, going, having 50 million thoughts going through my head going, I'm never going to be able to meditate. I think too much. Um, but letting it go. And then, sometimes meditating on an actual event that happened and kind of feeling it in a different way as a person that's moved through it. I did some of that. Of course, did a little bit of therapy. And I talked to, there was one woman that did some Reiki, is that it,
Yeah.
Reiki, stuff, and spent some time talking to her about energies and how you release these energies after you go through something traumatic, and that as adults you still can, even if the trauma's decades old, you still can release those energies and heal.
Yeah. Yeah. So is that why you call it spiritual? Because you were looking to the kind of the Eastern stuff with meditation and Reiki and stuff like that. Is that why you call it spiritual, or is that because you talked about the faith stuff? So is it both or what?
It's both. It's both. Yeah. As a child, I always say I don't know if I was born with faith because my birth mother tells me I'm a reunited adoptee. I reunited with my birth family, 30 years ago now, my birth
Wow.
mother and birth father. And I'm still close to my birth mom. And she says to me, I prayed every day I was pregnant with you, I would talk to you. And I said, I think it worked because when I was adopted, and into this very, very tumultuous home, I prayed without even really having a church. So something instinctually made me pray. I thought that I would sometimes talk to her, my birth mother. I used to call her Lovey, of course, because I didn't know her. So I would sit and talk to her, and then the other, I said to her, you became this sentient being, right? Because I spoke to you and I also spoke to God, it's an interesting combination. They were both these entities that I could not see, but believed in.
Yeah.
So I say spiritual because of that, and also because of the work, right? So being in touch with people, the more that you surround yourself with people, there are some people don't think spiritually at all. And that's okay. Everyone's different. But the more that you surround yourself with people who are open and have that spirituality, I feel like the more connected you can become to what it's done for you in your life and how to use it for healing. As I said,
Yeah.
spiritual healing.
Yeah. So you laughed a little bit when you said the about the therapist. Is that because it was a bit of a strange experience for you, or it didn't
It
work?
was strange. It was very strange. Um, yes, it was bizarre. It because I when I was when my family left, we were in a shelter for battered women and children when I was 12 years old. And after we left and we finally got out on our own, my mom, they got her a equivalency, high school equivalency degree because she didn't have a degree. My adoptive mother, I'm speaking of. We got away from my adoptive father, and they put us my brother and I into therapy. Well, my brother stayed in therapy and had some sessions and worked through some things, and I basically talked them right that convinced them that I was perfectly fine and never needed any therapy at all, and I was fully aware of everything that happened and had moved past it all and was ready to get on with my life at 12.
And they believed you.
So they believed me, which is
Yeah.
kind of crazy. So I never went back, and I was unfortunate enough to have some postpartum issues when after I had my daughter. I had postpartum depression, which now, of course, I know is so common. And I went then, and this is where that resiliency word, Simon, that we were talking about comes in. When I went for postpartum therapy, the therapist said to me, "You are the most resilient person I have ever met." And so when I was going to go back to a therapist, I thought, I'm resilient. Why do I need to do that? So
Yeah.
it kind of cracks me up because I'm always like, I'm the queen of avoidance on the therapy
Yeah.
side.
Yeah. Well, I had a complete meltdown in the therapist chair, and uh, I I found them very bizarre. I spoke to a few on the phone. I went to meet some of them, and I just thought, I'd asked them, okay, so can you tell? I asked one, can you tell me something about, um, the past successes you've had? Oh no, that's confidential.
Yeah,
Okay,
that's kind of
well,
crazy.
yeah, okay. Can you tell me a little bit about how the work would look? She couldn't answer that question either. I just absolutely crackpot. I hope American therapists are better than Harrogate ones. Anyway, so then there was another one who, oh yeah, she didn't feel it was appropriate to, she was involved in adoption, but she didn't feel it was appropriate
Oh,
to
those are my
share.
favorite.
I
Mm-hmm.
thought that was very interesting. Well, it's
Mm-hmm.
professional standards apparently. Well, yeah, okay, but like, it's a two-way street, right? Um,
It is.
but yeah, so I found the best of a bad bunch and had a complete meltdown, which actually encouraged me to restart my look for my birth mother, which was the best
Oh.
thing, which is the best thing I've done. Because if I hadn't done that, then I wouldn't have found out, wouldn't have the letter about the teddy bear and had the big aha moment around that. But
Mm-hmm.
so somebody said to me, "Well, you're supposed to have." Somebody said to me this just like about 3 months ago, so which is about 7 years since I saw this therapist. Um, they said their adoptee said, "Well, no, but you're supposed to have a meltdown in the therapist chair. That's the point of them, Simon." I went, "Ah, right. Oh, good, right, yeah. I hadn't got that. I didn't know that." So none of us are, neither of us are therapists, listeners. We don't. Anyway.
No.
So, but I know, I know I've heard a shed load of therapists who have said that who traditionally trained therapists, saying that traditional therapy doesn't work, and they've actually moved to something that's far more spiritual.
Mm-hmm.
But they have to kind of like keep their initials so that everybody knows that they've got the thing. They've got to do their CPD, and they've got to pretend that they're still training and using what they learnt in class. But what they learnt in class, you talked about meditation. So this was a guy, a therapist I heard speaking. He said, I didn't have time for anything in my life because I was either meditating, sleeping, or seeing clients. And he just took it, and it wasn't working for him. So he just thought he had to do more of it. It wasn't doing it right, and all this sort of stuff. Yeah, that's why I asked you the question whether because you laughed when you say the therapist. So, but at 12, you were able to pull the wool over their eyes.
Yes. And this, when I went into the last one, I actually said to her, I kind of came in saying, look, this is the kind of person I am. So this is how we're going to have to work. It's going to have to be really straightforward, and I need actionable takeaways. I can't come in and just kind of, as you said, have a meltdown. I need actionable takeaways to work on things.
Well,
because I'm not demanding.
but funny you should say that, because what works for me is the meltdowns.
Isn't that funny?
Yeah, what works for me is the meltdowns. It's the breakthrough points, the epiphanies, the big,
it's the release.
Release, breakdown to breakthrough, or whatever you want to say. Or those big shifts when you that come from an insight, when I realized that I was totally and utterly wrong.
And that's the hardest part, isn't it? Finding out you're wrong is not easy.
Well,
but it gives you new perspective.
Yeah. So that's an interesting one. Because I would say sometimes it's hard and sometimes it's really easy. It's not a once and done thing. I would, yeah. Somebody said to me a couple of months ago, or a month or so ago, Simon, you're really open. You're really open. I said, yes, I try to be. I try to be open, because I know that if I'm open, I know that if I'm open, I've got more chance of seeing new things and seeing how wrong I am. Right. So seeing, like, busting a belief. Like I don't bust it. It busts itself. Does that make any sense?
Yeah, it does make sense.
I'm hanging out at the bus stop for an epiphany, for a breakthrough. I'm not white knuckling it and trying to make the breakthrough happen. I'm trying to be relaxed, and so the belief kind of fades away, or it pops. Like it pops like a balloon, like a party balloon. It just pops. So you get a pin and it just pops. It's the key that unlocks the door. That's what works for me.
For me, it's also for me, a lot of the work, when you talk about the spiritual work, is kind of discovering what you think now as opposed to what you thought as a child about things. And discovering why you felt the way you did, or believed what you did as a child, and how that shaped, your life, what the choices you make in life. So it's figuring out what you believe, because sometimes you don't, sometimes you think you know what you believe, but if you start to really take a look at it, growing up, I thought I hated my father. That's right. And then I wrote an entire memoir and realized that that is not, just not the case. I loved him and I hated him. It was definitely both sides of the coin. And the love part, it was very easy to sweep that away and replace it just with the hate for a very, very long time. And so discovering what you really believe now as an adult, um, for me is half the battle, right? That it's okay to have both those feelings. It's okay to embrace both sides. It's not all one thing or another, right? A relationship with a parent can never be just one thing or another. It's not always just hate if they were abusive. It can be both love and hate.
So it's been okay with complexity rather than searching for simplicity.
Exactly. It's not it and also and looking at your decisions based on what you know now and what you have figured out you believe now. Um, Understanding past decisions through that, making maybe better decisions as you move forward, of course, that's one of the goals. Um, and understanding decisions you've made in the past without when I was working on my memoir, I spoke to a sociologist who happened to be transgender. And she was wonderful. And Simon, my father was turned out
Yeah.
was transgender. And the conversations that we had while this was in the beginning of writing the memoir. So I had started writing the memoir and I was quite angry. I was angry because when my father passed away, we didn't inherit anything. We were blocked from the childhood home, and a stranger that my father had known for about a year got kind of all the inheritance. And I was so angry, I thought, I'll show you and let me tell you, because I was accused of abandoning my father by this person that called me to let me know my father had passed away. And I wrote the memoir in response. So, I abandoned this person. I abandoned her. And again, we're going to be talking. If I mess up with pronouns, I do apologize. I did know my father is a man. So, but the abandonment accusation made me write it angrily. So I'll tell you all the bad things that happened, all these things that shaped my childhood. And then when I spoke to this woman, Grace, and I explained what I was writing and shared some of the writing with her, the one big feedback, the biggest piece of feedback that I received was, VL, you need to forgive yourself. Because what I was doing is blaming the child that I was, and then later as an adult who did not really understand my father being transgender, did not understand the choices, and did not allow her to be transgender in my life around me. I felt guilt. I felt guilt for having cut my father out of my life as an adult. And that must have come through in that conversation with this sociologist who I spoke to about the book, who was very, very helpful with the book. And she said the main thing you need to do is forgive yourself. And so then I could look back at this book, and there was a lot of forgiveness to be done for both myself and decisions that were made, which nobody, of course, would blame me for based on kind of what we went through. And also forgiving Joe, my father, based on some of, or not, at least beginning to forgive my father, because she had been trapped, an entire lifetime trapped, so there was the biggest thing that has been a big part of spiritual healing is forgiveness, forgiving myself, forgiving my father, forgiving my adoptive mother for bringing us into the family. Lots and lots of forgiveness has been part of the spiritual healing.
Yeah. So this is a bit of, like, I know it sounds like a bit of a shrinky question. Do you mind if I ask a shrinky question?
A shrinky question. Oh Lord, oh no. Go ahead.
So you're just saying that you kind of you cut him out of your life.
Mm-hmm.
But when somebody told you that you'd cut him out of your life, you got angry.
Yes.
Yeah.
Immediate response was anger because no, I had stopped being involved with Joe due to our past history once I had my own child, because we had tried to have a relationship and it was rocky, and I was actually, there were times when I was concerned that it would damage my daughter, right? So
Yeah, there was
I
a reason. There was
right.
it
Oh,
was
absolutely.
it was a justified reason. You didn't just do it out on a whim. It was
No,
no, no.
no. But even though I was 100% justified to have cut Joe out of my life, I still, after writing the book and looking at the past and kind of coming to understand what a life would be for someone who was transgender and had to live in hiding their entire life, it does not make an excuse for the behavior, the abusive behavior, but I started to have a better understanding. And I think that as a result, started to feel guilty, right?
Yeah.
That I shouldn't have cut Joe off. I should have tried.
No.
I should have had that, let her have that experience of showing her true self to us, coming to visit as a woman. That should have probably been what I did. So I felt really guilty about it, but I've let a lot of it, I've forgiven
Yeah.
myself.
Something I was talking to a mentor of mine yesterday, and something happened that was kind of similar. It's completely different. It's a completely different context. Obviously,
Mm-hmm.
nothing to do with that. But it was. She said, "Well, it, that person touched a nerve with you, Simon. So um, if you'd had if you were firm in your grounding, and you're firm in your reasoning for doing something, what that other person said of you wouldn't have bothered you. Does that make sense?"
I was Okay, so they were in my childhood home, standing in the kitchen. They were calling to tell me my father had passed away. And in the same breath, I was supposed to, my father had tried to come visit us. And I had turned down the visit. I didn't want him to visit,
Yeah.
her to visit, excuse me. Um, and so then the person on the phone that was informing me of my father's death said, you're a terrible person. You abandoned Joe. How
Wow.
dare you abandon this person? She was a sweet woman. She was all these
Wow.
things. And then I started to say, you knew a sweet woman, but I knew a terrible man.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so I was angry I felt so accused. I was
Yeah.
accused of abandonment because she didn't know the story. And so I told the story. I wrote it all down, and then went, of course, years, it took a lot of years, and of course, very cathartic to write it all down and then go back and look at it as I grew into, forgiving myself, forgiving Joe a bit, and moving in the right direction.
Yeah. Wow. Wow. So, do you still think are you still working on yourself, or what does that look like now for you?
Well, I skipped out on the therapist, of course,
Yeah.
in my typical form. Um, but am I still working? Yes, mostly through writing. A lot of it through writing and meditating and I've become so much more open. Like you had said, you're open. I've become more open, I think, in terms of understanding that the myriads of ways that people exist, right? People exist in so many different ways in our world. And the more that we can embrace, you know, all of them, right? As I always say this, I think that of course, still have work. I think I'll have work for the rest of my life. But I have become more open, and I've also come to almost not to feel as not completely connected. Remember we talked about feeling that connection and belonging, but I'm feeling more, I'll say universally connected, universally. I'm starting to feel those connections that I kind of may have pushed away because they felt unsafe.
Yeah. So I use this quote a lot on the podcast, and it's from a French guy whose first name is Pierre. It's Pierre Teilhard du Jardin, and the quote is, "We're not human beings having a spiritual experience. We're a spiritual being having 7 billion human experiences."
Exactly. Exactly, Simon. And if only we could all, the key, for peace, for love, for belonging, for all the good things of the world, the key is that is understanding that we are all connected,
Yeah.
spiritually connected.
Did I tell you my swimming? Have you heard my swimming pool metaphor?
Nope.
No. So, around Christmas, I have to go to a different swimming pool because mine's shut for maintenance. And it's a huge swimming pool. It's like 60 yards long swimming pool, right? It's 12 lanes, 60 yards long. And they can make it into two small swimming pools. There's a plastic. It's like 8 foot across, rigid plastic wall that rises from the bottom of the swimming pool to turn one swimming pool into two, right? So that they can have two races going on rather than one, right? So, and then they can drop it down so that it makes one big pool again, right? So, as I read this letter from my birth mum about the teddy bear, and realized that the teddy bear was a symbol of her love, not a consolation prize, and felt the pain that she felt having handed me over
Of course,
4
terrible
days
pain. Yep.
before, right? as I read that, the tears kind of cascaded down my face, and they washed away 40 seconds of intense anger, stroke, fear of my birth mother. Right? They washed them away. And it felt like I was one with her. So we were, before I read the letter, we were two separate swimming pools. But then as the anger and the fear of her went, it was like the big rigid plastic wall coming down, and we became one. Two became one. And then I realized that I've had that same feeling. I've kind of got it now talking to you about it. I've had that same feeling. I've had that same feeling in rugby stadiums, in rock concerts, and I have felt one with everybody. So instead of this being a nice idea, we are one spiritual being having 7 billion human experience. Instead of it being a nice idea in my head, it's like an embodied feeling. It's something that I get in my spirit, in my whole.
Beautiful.
And that does the hard work. So I've gone way from way upstream, right? So I'm not looking at my behaviors. I'm not looking at the feelings that drive those behaviors. I'm not looking at the thoughts that drive the feelings, that drive the behaviors. I'm looking at what I am and what we are, right? One spiritual being. So the sense of belonging isn't needed. Like it's like a relationship has to exist between two people, right? But I'm just seeing the whole world as one. So do you know what I mean? It's all gone, right? All the separation. And I feel that that's what trauma does. It kind of divides us off.
It does. It does.
And psychologists shrinks don't look at who we are. They look at how we feel, or what we think, or what we believe. And that's not where the magic happens. That's not where the magic happens. The magic happens when we have a shift in who we are. Yeah, the belief stuff, the belief busting. That's
beautiful.
That's not where the stuff happens. The belief. Okay, so like the tears cascading down my face. I realized how wrong. How wrong I was in this fear of my fear of her. So spirit, the essence, the essential part of who we are, not what we think, not how we feel, not what we believe, not our relationships with others, but us, just us, who we are, and that stuff, that spirit, that essence of who we are, it isn't damaged. I've felt damage, yeah, for sure. Have I been damaged? Well, what's damaged? What's hurt? my feelings. I was going to tell you a little story about my sister, who spookily just rang, right? But I haven't got her say so to say that. So I'll share that with you after when we finish. But yeah, so that's kind of that's my take on there. On the damage stuff. Yeah.
See, still have work to do.
Sorry?
I said, see, still have work to do.
I still have work to do, yeah.
No, me. Oh, I meant me.
Well,
I think
the work to be done is well, what does it look like? I mean, you said something earlier, like once you'd said it, you could see how it was incorrect. And do you remember saying that? You said something, and you said, "Oh, it sounds a bit silly," or something. Like when you put pen to paper, like do you look at what you look at what you've written and you think, "Oh, that's not me. That wasn't me. That's not true." It's like, I'm making any sense. Sometimes. Sometimes sometimes we say something out loud and we realize that, oh no, that's not right. Like when sometimes I write stuff down, I do a bit of journaling or something like that, and you think, oh, that's not the truth. That's not the truth of who I am. Isn't that why writing's cathartic? Or why yeah.
Or yeah, it helps you explore. Yes, it's cathartic because I apologize for the dog.
I didn't hear it.
Oh, okay. It's cathartic because yes, you look at, you discover untruths, your own untruths, right? That
Yeah.
you've set up as your truths forever, and they're really not true.
Yeah.
Yes, absolutely.
Sacred cows.
Yes, your
Yeah.
sacred cows. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And yeah, you do say things, and I'm not sure which part of the conversation you were talking about, but yeah, I do you do say things out loud and then you think about them and go, is that really what I think? And is that really correct?
Yeah. Yeah. So there's going to be links to VL's social in the blog and book and stuff in the show notes. What have I not asked you about that you'd like to talk about? Is there anything, or you got a question for me, or?
I found it when you said you feared your birth mother. I think that I've had a lot of messages from people who are searching for their birth families and haven't been successful and still looking, and for a long time I was kind of trying to help people do so, and I still give them the right links if I can. If I can help, I will help. Or do the searches and all that stuff. But I feel like fear is 100% natural in the search for family and the reunion process. You fear the unknown, you fear what we assume, like we assume that, I didn't know why my birth mother gave me away, and I think that's a perfectly, in my experience, rational feeling to have when you're going through that.
So that was in the therapist chair. So the therapist asked me a question about search, and the idea popped into my head of my birth mother being actually outside the room of that therapy room, open at the other side of the door, me opening the door and her rejecting me again. That was the fear, and I went ice cold. with fear and then red hot with anger. I'm not going to let this fear haunt me. So that's why I picked up that's why I picked up the search again, and it was completely unjustified. It may be natural, but it was I was totally and utterly wrong. Unfortunately, she died a long time before I did anything, looked at anything, and people say, "Oh, that's a shame." I said, "Well, yeah, it is, but that healing moment that I'd had when I realized that that my beliefs were totally wrong, that was a gold dust moment, 2 gold dust moments for me.
Yeah, I found my birth father as well, and then the relationship was cut off. So I went through the double rejection, which was, yeah, how many times do you give them a chance? But yeah, so that's very, very difficult.
Yeah.
Yeah,
but luckily you're the most resilient person.
Exactly.
Right? Bounce back.
I have moved past that.
Thanks, Phil. Thanks, listeners. We will speak to you again very soon.
Thank you, Simon.